Go ahead and start our introduction really quickly. So we got lots of content today. I wanted you guys to be able to get all of it in. Today we have our own Marshall Martin with us. Marshall has been an entrepreneur for 25 years, a certified Petra coach for 6 years now, with over 600 planning days under his belt. And his companies that he's worked with have ranged from startups to multi-billion-dollar companies. Marshall is one of our most veteran team members and also serves on our leadership team. So one tool that Marshall's found particularly useful during his time coaching is a book called The Coaching Habit. It's by Michael Bungay Stanier. I don't know that I said that right. Maybe did. Yeah. But in this book, Stanier draws on years of experience training more than 10,000 managers from around the globe in practical and everyday coaching skills, which he basically compounds into 7 essential questions that are targeting unlocking your people's potential. So today, Marshall is going to take us through those 7 questions one by one, and he's going to disclose how to best use them to tune into your team, get them to tap into their higher order thinking skills, and coach them through overcoming day-to-day challenges. So reminder that this is an interactive session. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat button and a Q&A button. We encourage you to use both of those at any time if you have a question or comment for Marshall. And without further ado, Marsh, you ready to get the ball rolling?
I'm ready to get the ball rolling. So literally, it's almost baseball season, provided we don't have a lockout. And we can. So yes, I'm ready to get the ball rolling. I just asked that in a virtual environment here, I'm not keeping mind of those chats or questions. So direct those at Leah. She will stop me as she needs to ask a question.
Professional interrupter.
There are no questions that are off limits, but we'll dive in here. I don't anticipate it to take the full hour, but who knows? As long as we're providing value, that we'll keep going. So first of all, good afternoon, and I'm glad everyone could join today. I know it's President's Day, and some people have the day off. If you're in your day off and you decided to join today, that tells me that you want to be here and that you want to learn something that'll make you better as a leader. So for many years, many of us have led people, but have never formally been taught skills to lead or have developed your own style that may be effective. And so what I would start with a question for all of you is ask yourself, how would you best describe your style? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you about 10 or 15 seconds. In fact, I'm going to give you like 30 seconds. And I'm going to have you write down how you would best define your style in 10 words or less. So I'll just give you a few moments there as we lean into this. Go ahead.
This is your coaching style?
This is your style as a leader. What is your leadership style? How would you describe that? 10 words or less.
As you guys finish those, if you feel comfortable, go ahead and drop those in the chat. We'd love to see some of your answers.
Oh, this could be fun. I'll lean on you to help highlight some of the awesome ones, Leah, or some that may even allow us to share a laugh.
All right. David says service leadership.
Servant leadership. Okay. So I'm just going to keep rolling along, Leah, and you can capture those. And again, if you think I need to come up for air or something like that, you can drop those in. You can't interrupt me in a way that we can't recover. So now I'll ask you another question. Do you consider yourself a leader or a manager? Write that down as well, because there is a difference. And I'll go ahead and say leaders lead people to improve and managers manage tasks. Leaders work on the business. Managers work in the business. So ask yourself, are you a leader or you're a manager? You don't have to type that in the chat, because you may be frustrated that you're managing and you'd rather be leading. And we're going to share some things with you today that allow you to get out of that managerial trap and more into that leadership mode that you want to be in. And then one last point before I dive into content. How many of you know of a leader or a manager has been placed in leadership because they've been in the business for a really long time, or they were the best person in that role, and we needed to move them into a leadership position so we could advance them in the organization or pay them a little more money? How many of you can think of at least one person? Again, we want to be respectful. You don't have to drop that in the chat, but I only put that there to remind you that businesses promote leaders every day who in some cases don't even like people. So think about that. And so I would say that the reason that's timely for this presentation is we're in the most important time in our careers, and businesses have to have the best leaders they've ever had. We've heard of this thing called the Great Resignation, and everyone's wondering why people are leaving businesses. And we see it in nearly 100% of the companies we work with. And most of the time, people are saying this is a result of wage inflation or work desires, such as remote workforce and things like that. But I challenge you to think differently. We don't see people leaving great leaders. And where leaders challenge, appreciate, engage, and give clear direction, get out of the way, people aren't looking to go anywhere. So learn to coach and care and see if your A players don't stick around for a while. Remember, we got a lot of data points here with over 150 companies we work with. So we get to see more data points. And so I'll just say that leadership is a privilege and not a right. And it comes with a huge amount of responsibility. And I'm hoping that today you'll leave here with at least one takeaway that helps you lead better and exercise your privilege of leading others, and ultimately places you doing more work on the business. And Brene Brown, the author of The Rising Strong and Daring Greatly, describes coaching as an art that's easier said than done, stating that it takes courage to ask questions as opposed to just offering advice. And by giving people freedom to find their own way, make their own mistakes, and create their own wisdom is both brave and vulnerable. So with that being said, Leah gave a little intro to the book, Michael Bungay-Stanier, and he stood on the stage at one of the summits that we attended. And watching Michael deliver this message in such simple topic was transformational for me. It changed the way I led people, and also reminded me of those gaps or weaknesses or bad habits that I had. So Michael also intersected along the way 15 years ago with Daniel Goleman, which in a paper on leadership gets results, Daniel Goleman, he of Emotional Intelligence 2.0, that ability to read and understand people and allow them or get them to do things that they need to do and leave them in control of what it is they go do. So those two go back and forth together. And those are two of my most visited books on the bookshelf. And you can see my little coaching habit book here with all the tabs here, so I can have a reminder to go back and review those. And it lists that coaching style was one of 6 leadership traits, or one of 6 leadership styles, but the least used. And so I'm a big believer, obviously, the coaching style. And if you don't like the hat I have on, chances are I can put on several others before the session's over, because I always feel like when I put my hat on, I'm in coaching mode. So let's go into, okay, let's talk about why people aren't leading. Well, the number one thing is people say, I don't have time. Well, when you think about it, taking time to coach requires patience, requires repetition. However, it's easier just to bark out orders and just keep moving. Are you that person that gets a little nervy or impatient? You just want the quick update. You just want to bark out orders and keep moving? That's okay. I just want you to be aware of that. And we also ask ourselves, when we think about leading, and I ask you to refer back to your organizational chart and your number of direct reports. Now, people ask us often, what is the magical amount of number of direct reports that one should have an ability to coach and develop? And I said coach and develop, not manage, but coach and develop. The magic number seems to fall in that number of 6 to 8. You'll find when you get north of 8 that oftentimes you only had time for managing and therefore not time for developing. Now, I'm not going back and tell you go resettle or realign your organizational structure to get it down to those magical numbers. But I am going to ask you, do you feel like you're in the act of coaching and developing those people for development and not just coaching and managing them for performance? And again, there's a difference, coaching for development versus managing for performance. And we say, well, why can't we get to this today? And I go over and say that we're a reflection of the coaching we've received over the years. Now, personally, I'll tell you, I spent 25 years plus in business, and I hope maybe I don't have any leaders of mine on the phone today, but if I did, I would share the same. I very seldom got specific feedback on how to get better. And finally, I crafted a way which just was based on the golden rule: treat others how you'd like to be treated, or coach others the way that you'd like to be coached. And what's interesting about that is, knowing most of you like I know you, I could probably walk into your companies and identify your people and your departments based on what I know of your behaviors. So if you're getting bad coaching yourself, you're probably going to deliver bad coaching, just like at home. And probably if you're delivering bad parenting, your children may furthermore go on and deliver bad parenting as well. So all these are behaviors. So be conscious and find your own style. Don't just be a reflection of others. And it's okay to have your own unique style, whatever that might be. Now, when I say keep it simple, personally, I like to have a framework in which that I can fall back into something that's memorable for myself. And in this case, I would say just follow the 7 questions in this book. You can coach someone in about 10 minutes per day and make it daily, make it informal, make sure you're in the moment when you're coaching others, and do it until it's a habit. And it is estimated that 45% of the time we spend in our waking moments during the day are habitual. And it takes not less than 21 days of doing something to form a habit. Let's talk about some outcomes for the day before we get into the coaching questions. Outcomes of the day, you'll walk out of here, hopefully developing a habit of curiosity and hence slowing yourself down a bit. Ask more questions in your interactions. Listen better in your interactions. Teaching more, transferring ownership to others, and then helping others unlock their potential. So make sure that you list a few of those outcomes you'd like to walk out with today. And if we don't cover those today, follow back up with me or with us in a way to help you fall into this habit of coaching more. Now, again, back to beyond, I don't have time. We have to break out of what's referred to in the book as the vicious circles. Now, all of us at some point, whether we're new in our careers and leading or farther along in our careers in leading, in some cases, we've created an overdependence on us. Now, that's easy to do when we're newer in our roles and leading and developing people. We feel like we need to know the answer. Now, I say this, and he usually gets a smile in the room. People often think that leadership always knows the answer, and you're just not sharing it with the company. And the employees would most likely be frightened if they knew how many times that we don't actually have the answer, and therefore we're figuring it out along the way. But oftentimes by us feeling like we always have to have an answer, we're creating this overdependence on us. And I always told my leaders along the way, that's fine if you want to create an overdependence on you. But if you create that overdependence on you, guess what? You're not ever going to get to take any vacations. You quite possibly are going to be in the same role that you're in right now for the rest of your career. And at some point, you're going to be miserable in a way that you're going to want out of call it the shackles, if you will, of that leadership role. So there's a term that I use or a phrase that I use. It says, don't be the rock in the stream. Don't be that rock that water has to flow around in an effort to get from point A to point B. And so certainly many of you should write down over the next several weeks, what are those things that you have positioned yourself that only you know the answer to, or that you've taken pride in having the answers, or in fact, you just can't help yourself. And as one leader told me last week in a planning day, man, it just feels good to know all this. And I feel needed when people come to me. And your job's not always to feel needed. Your job is often to be that person that coaches that other person to success. Now, also another one of the vicious circles is how many times the physical show of hands, if we were together in person, we could see the physical show of hands, that you're overwhelmed. You got too much to do and your people are leaning on you. And all of a sudden you're in this whirlwind where that you're distracted and you can't be in the moment coaching others. So ask yourself, when you're coaching, it takes a certain amount of preparation time and an effort to sit down with that person and coach and lead them. And are you able to take enough time and not be overwhelmed by what's going on in the moment? If you're not ready to be fully present in the moment, working with that person to coach and develop them, you may have to sometimes step away and come back when you are able to be in the moment, because not being in the moment, your people will pick that up with you and they'll sense that you're not there, and therefore they won't be as inspired to follow your lead. And then just being disconnected from your work. Again, it's just one of those things where that you're not ready. You're not able to direct the meeting or direct the coaching as if you would. So therefore, you just have that bit of distraction that takes you out of your element. So with that said, let's dive in here to the 7 essential questions. Now, this is what's in this book. This is the core of what's in this book. And these questions, we're going to go through each of these questions individually. And you're going to spend more time asking questions in your interactions with your people than you are providing answers. So the what's on your mind and the really great question, and what else? And then working down the list, what's the real challenge? What do they really want? How can I help? If you say yes to this, no to what? And then what was most useful? So I will tell you that this works also with customers, suppliers, colleagues, bosses, and I say this lightly, maybe even spouses and children, but I know this, my spouse would tell you, she would say that there's no way I would work with you, and don't bring your coaching habits home to me because I'm not the athlete. I'm like, okay, duly noted, but still, if you want to tread lightly and go into that realm of using this at home, feel free to do so. And so that first question, this is that kickstart question. You sit down, and instead of diving in, sharing all about you, you simply turn to that person that you're coaching and just a simple question, what's on your mind? Now, for all of you that are engaged in the Petra process and you're doing those 2-week meeting rhythms, this is as simple as sometimes that personal high, personal low, business high, business low. These are those things that are directional about how's the person doing, how are they doing in their work, what are some of those limiters and things like that. It is not an open door. It is not an open door to get into small talk that takes you off track. And it's not a defense mechanism for them to get engaged in small talk to detract you from what's the point at hand. But you do want to allow just to sit back and listen. And oftentimes, I've had times in a 45 or 50-minute coaching session where I may have only said a handful of words, and I learned so much by listening. Keep the agendas relatively consistent. You can train or create a habit for that user in which that they can know what it is that you're expecting to listen for, so they know how, or you know how to best help them. And then also be willing to talk to them at times about what matters to them most. We know that sometimes leaders, if you've ever taken a DISC profile, that a leader that's a strong D does not want to get engaged with a athlete that shows up for a coaching session who wants to engage in a lot of small talk. Okay. And so that's really that kickstart question. Use the 3P model, talk about their projects, talk about people, talk about patterns, anything that gets them to open up. And over time, see if you can get that person to open up to you. Let's go to question 2. And this one is one of my favorite questions. And what else? Now, again, if you think about you're doing more listening, they're doing more talking, the and what else creates more options to pick from. And again, we're not showing up to tell everyone every step of the way about what they need to do in the act of being developed. We're here to open up their brains to get them to share what's on their mind in a way that we have several selections to pick from. And so get them to open up the options for better decisions. Also, again, we call not resisting the urge to give the answer. We call that being the advice monster. I wish we were together in person. Physical show of hands that if sometimes you're the advice monster, you can't wait. They're stumbling a bit, Leah, thank you. They're stumbling a bit with coming up with ideas or solutions, and we get impatient and we can't help ourselves, and we feel like we got to chime in and give the next answer for them so we keep moving. So you have to exercise that patience and be listening. The and what else question in literally sometimes will drive, I call it the athlete, we're the coach or the athlete. Literally sometimes we ask it over and over and over. And if you ask the and what else over and over, you'll find that you come up with plenty of ways that they come up with the idea or the solution for what they need to go do. And then you don't have to come up with anything. There was a point in my career in which that there was a holding area outside of my office, and people would drop by. It looked like airplanes just circling around, coming in for a flight landing. And finally, one day I thought, you know what? They're just stopping by, grabbing a number. I'm giving them an answer. And then I bark out the answer and they keep going. But then I found myself working between 5 p.m. at night and midnight doing my work while that I gave out all the answers to them so they could go get their work done. Now, you could say that's servant leadership, but servant leadership's not always giving the answers to that person. But I finally started saying, hey, why don't you bring me 3 different ideas about how to solve something? We'll pick one of those 3, or we'll come together on a 4th one. So just remember to ask that and what else. So you have plenty of things to pick from. Then ask that person, what do you think you should do to resolve this? Let's go to the focus question. Oftentimes we sit down and our athletes or our employees, they just kind of dump quite a few things on us. And they say, you know, I'm overwhelmed. I got so much to do. I'm working on these 10 things. But yet, how many times have you found that those people are spending an inordinate amount of time solving the wrong problem? So this is where we have to dig deep to understand and ultimately transfer ownership. Get them focused on the real problem. See if they can select the real problem. In some cases, we have to help them prioritize because they may be overwhelmed. And then also make sure you find the real problem and not the first problem. And all else fails, we may have to jump in, give them a little bit of advice, not to solve the problem, but just get them to the next outcome that they aspire for, and get, in our terms, get them to be very specific and measurable with what it is they're going to do. And also sometimes we have to tell our people, don't worry about those few things, just focus on these. And then let's agree on what success looks like. And if they're extremely overwhelmed, you may want to shorten your interval in which you get back together with them again so that you can allow them to gain some small victories between that coaching you're providing them and the success they're experiencing. And then also being mindful of the fact that over the last 2 years, we've found that many of us are going through or have gone through a lot of things outside of work that needs to be carefully considered during this pandemic that weighs into account how we give direction or how we provide coaching. So let's get to the foundational question. The foundational question, what do you want? And then when you say, what do you want? It's kind of like, what do you want from me as your leader, as your coach, as your mentor? Now, you have to understand, if you see that line in there, it says the brain is scanning at 5 times per second to evaluate safety. So as we sit there and develop this relationship to understand what that athlete on the other end wants, we also have to understand, have we created an open and safe environment for that person to bring up some of the challenges or some of the things they need help on, and they don't feel over scrutinized? So when you get into that terror quotient list in there, you know, is my leader or is the company for or against me? You know, do I know the future about what it means for me? You know, are they more important or less important than me? And then how do I get a say or not? So when you're talking, your people are sitting there and evaluating these things, going through their head about how comfortable they are about to bring things to you as someone that will help them get to the finish line with success. And oftentimes, as we understand that, we're able to give better direction and provide a more comfortable work environment in a way that they feel comfortable taking ownership. Now, I was reminded, and many of you need to be reminded, that your role in the organization is what it is. And if you're the CEO and you walk up to a group and you give direction, even if you want to be flat amongst that team, meaning that one with the many, meaning that you just want to be one of the gang, no matter what you say, you still have CEO behind your name, and it's going to be treated differently. So you have to find a way to be welcoming and open to the way that you present yourself, so that when you're asking people for feedback and asking for ways we can improve things or ultimately assign work, that they're willing to share that information with you in a way that respects the fact that there is some structure, kind of the rank in the business. However, it's enlightening to see that some 30 years into my career, the old days of the org chart aren't as rigid as they once were, and we're able to flatten our organizations and gain valuable feedback from our people, where that as CEOs and leaders, we don't have to have all the answers. The lazy question. How many of you like to be lazy? I like to be lazy sometimes. And so that's just simply, you've listened some more, they've created ideas, they've created things to pick from. Then it becomes, okay, now that we've gone through all this, what do you want from me? And just sit back and listen. And again, we're working ourselves from in the business to on the business. And for us to work on the business, we have to get rid of those things that we own or only we know or we've chosen to do ourselves. And we have to be able to transition those things to our team so that we can work on the business. And so if you think about the ultimate outcome in leadership, the ultimate outcome in leadership is to be able to transfer everything off your plate so that you can provide span of control across more people in the act of coaching and developing people. And therefore the business moves forward and your people move forward. And when it comes down to how can I help, my role is always, how can I help the most amount of people? And am I developing my people at a pace that's equal to or greater than the growth of the business? And if you can't answer that you're developing those people at a growth rate that's equal to or greater than that at the pace of the business, you may not be doing your most effective job of coaching and leading. So when you say the lazy question, how can you move the business forward and work less? Okay. You can also lead with things like, out of curiosity, could you do this? My favorite 3 words, help me understand. Or would you consider? You have to find those ways to ask those minimally invasive questions that opens up that other person where they ultimately are still in control of where it is they're headed. And then when all else fails, we get to the strategic question. And again, this is in my olden days of leading, and that is, if we say yes to this, what are we going to say no to? And in Rockefeller Habits terms, this is as simple as the good old-fashioned start, stop, keep exercise. And sometimes it's for those projects you're currently working on. You've heard the old saying, if everything's important, nothing's important. Well, there's a little truth to that. We can't be magical at everything we do. And so we started in with projects. Which can we postpone? What meetings can you stop attending? You know, what resources do you need a yes for? And so then simply working in the 3P models, the projects, the people, and the patterns. What expectations you need to manage? You know, what relationships will you let go of? Often the answers are already there. It's our job as coaches to get them to arrive at the answers. If you're not doing a start, stop, keep with each of your direct reports, I invite you to do a start, stop, keep each quarter. It's as simple as you sitting down with one of your reports or whoever you provide coaching for and jotting down what it is you feel they should start doing, what you feel they should stop doing, and what you feel they should keep doing. And then I encourage you to get them to do the same exercise. Let them go first. And then if you're not in direct alignment, help them understand the way that they can go through those start, stop, keeps that ultimately paves the way to their success. I would also say when you do the start, stop, keep with each of your employees or those that you coach, I would ask you to get them to also do a start, stop, keep with yourself and give them a shot at it and sit there in silence and accept the constructive feedback. And then go ask yourself what you're going to do to change the outcome so that you're a more effective leader. So this leads us to the learning question. We get to the end of these coaching sessions and we said, what was most useful for you? For those of you who deal with me regularly, I ask the question at the end of the call or at the end of the interaction, did I help you? What was it that I helped you with? What is the outcome? How could you apply that in other situations? Is there anything you learned that you would do different at some point? It also helps you understand it's not a one-size-fits-all coaching model. What's important to some may not be important to others. So learning that person, making it very unique and special for that person in that relationship through coaching will typically get that person, if you do it right, they'll feel like the most important person in the world during that coaching session. And they'll be bought in about you helping them select the ideas that they came up with that ultimately led them to focused on the right things, being able to block out the noise, being more intentional with their work, learning and getting more work-life balance. They will not learn if you just tell them. And I'll go back and tell you that also, if you just show up and you tell them everything to do, you will create a dependency on yourself in which they will show up and ask you what they need to do next. And therefore, they'll never go do it on their own and be able to take care of themselves or their teams. And Lyd, we've got, before I get to this last slide here, to ask if there's any questions or anything in the chat of where anyone would like to ask anything before we dive into what we'll do differently as coaches.
We have one question in the Q&A box, and it says, if time, please explain the 2-week meeting rhythm. And I think in this context, they mean how to use these questions in a 2-weeker.
Okay, I'm going to reach over here and grab one of my playbooks. It's always, hopefully all of you have a playbook that's within arm's distance from you. So you can jot this down if you don't have a playbook with you. And what I would tell you is if you do have a playbook that's handy, go to page 40 and 41 of the playbook, and we go back and we talk about the questions. Oh, just a second here. And we go back to the questions about so what's on your mind? When we talk about what's on your mind, again, that's the little bit of that personal high, personal low, business high, business low. That's a little bit about what's on your mind in the personal context and a little bit in the business context. If your people aren't prepared or they're not showing up for that meeting, or they tend to shut down on you, we all have those people that show up and they're so mechanical and they cannot open themselves up to sharing with you, you may have to ask that question, and what else? You may have to ask that question, and what else? Over and over and over, because you just can't, you sense possibly by reading the body language, you sense by maybe some of the comments that there's something else going on there that you need to know. So that's a little bit about during that personal high and low and business high and low, or how are you interacting with your team members, or what can management do to help you? Getting into, the next part, reviewing the priorities. When you're reviewing the priorities and you're getting into those questions around, what's the real challenge for you? Well, first of all, you're just going down through their priority review or their top tasks from the last section or session. And then you're starting to get into, did they get their work done? If not, what is the real challenge? But again, we're not telling them what they do different. We're getting them to walk through, why aren't you able to push your priorities forward? Let's unpack that a bit. Is it because of your schedule? Are you doing things you shouldn't be doing? So you can weave these questions in to that dialogue, with the ultimate outcome being you're coaching and listening, but they're talking probably, I'd say in a 45-minute session, they're probably talking 35 to 40 minutes of the time, and you're talking 5 to 10 minutes of the time. Then when it gets down to how can I help you? Again, that's what can management do to help you with your work or with what you're working on. And then always getting to the end, what was most useful for you. And that's, again, another connection to those employees or athletes that we're coaching, so that we know how to be prepared as we get together for what's important to them to be successful, not just in doing their work, but in the act of coaching.
Okay, then we've got one more question that just came in. Can you explain more of what do you want? I wish I had the clip from the notebook right now and could play it where he's like, what do you want?
So we're going here about, oh, what do you want? Well, it's really kind of, what do you want from me? Not, do you want ice cream and gift cards and, 6 days off and working remote? It's understanding what is it based on what you're doing, coaching. It can be as much as part of like a formal review process is, what do you want? But we can't open it up to anything's fair game. It has to be within reason, right? Because as leaders, we often send out surveys and said, hey, here's the employee net promoter score survey. And, what do you want? Well, sorry, gang. What do you want that we can make this one more time here? What do you want from us to make this a better place to work? Or how can I be a better leader? It really is just understanding how that person can be more effective through your coaching in that role. Sometimes they may want you to resolve their problem, and sometimes they may just want you to listen. Any other questions?
There's a follow-up question on the 2-weeker that says, that was not really my question. Very familiar with daily, monthly, weekly, etc. meeting rhythms. I had not heard of a 2-week meeting rhythm. I was just curious. So do we kind of answer that walking through the different parts of a 2-weeker? Wait and see. Does anyone else have any questions while we're wrapping up the Q&A here? Mm-hmm. All right, I think you're safe to continue for now. I'll interrupt you if something comes in.
So let's do this. I'm going to get the folks out there in attendance today, and then I'm going to escape out of the presentation mode. And I want to get people to write down, what are the 5 things you will do differently as a coach as a result of what you heard today in this session? What are 5 things you will do differently? And just type your number 1 into the chat, and then we'll take a look at those and see if we can get some experience sharing across the team. So as a result of the coaching habit, 7 questions. Hey, we got some candidates. Shut up and listen. I think when I probably said that 40 to 45 minutes of talking as the leader and 5 to 10 minutes, Patty, stop talking at least a little bit, right?
Hey, John, yes, the deck and recording will be shared. I'll cover that in the end, but you guys will all receive a recap afterwards.
Oh, and by the way, for those that, what's the link they should hit to get the recap, Leah? Because for those that respond, I have a 7-page summary of questions from where that I summarized from the book. I'd be more than glad to send to those people that want that.
Yeah, that's great. So by registering, you automatically sign up to receive the recap. So Marshall, if you just want to shoot those over to me, I'll make sure to link them in that recap.
All right, so let's see. Listen, learn, then lead, leader, servant. Let's see one more time. Going down through here. I want to see some of the things that maybe you could touch on. Going here. Coach upstream. Be interesting to know, coach upstream. That sounds like a novel concept. How do you coach the person who's coaching you? We've got a few advice monsters out there, right? Oh, this one will come across. This is a no-no. Hearing what you want versus what's really being said. My friend Craig Moore on the West Coast. Continue to ask the ask what else, leading questions to draw out their thinking. Also, it is a tactic to understand if that person showed up for your coaching session prepared. And I once had a rule that if they did not fill out their information in advance of the meeting and they showed up and I could sense that they weren't prepared, it usually only happened once and I'm not proud of it. But if they showed up unprepared for the session, I would typically just ask that we end the meeting promptly and for them to go back and get prepared, because it takes a lot for us to give our time to coach people. And we know as coaches, we will coach those who aspire to be better through our mentorship. And if they're not ready, sometimes there's a reason for that. but let's don't take both parties' time if they're not ready for the meeting. So encourage your people, if you're using the 2-week rhythm, encourage your people to be prepared in advance so you can make the most of the session. There's someone on over dependency. Let's see. Okay, so write these down. Make sure, let's see if I can. Is my screen still sharing, Leah?
Yep. What you looking to do here?
I just want to stop the share.
There we go. Okay, hang on. Let me come back. Perfect. We were having a few technical difficulties beforehand, where, figuring out PowerPoint. But I want to thank everybody for attending today. Marshall, does that kind of wrap it up for you?
Yeah, what I would say is coaching is a true gift. And hopefully you're in the role of coaching or the act of coaching because that's where you want to be. I was in a room a couple of months ago with a company, and I asked how many people were in leadership roles, and I had quite a few people like raise their hand, and then I asked out of those people that were leading, how many of them truly wanted to lead people, and it was by far the majority didn't necessarily thrive on leading people, and that's okay because sometimes that's not how our brain works. But if you're not in the mode of leading others, it's okay. Just make sure you share with someone that that's not your cup of tea. And that's okay. If there's a role as an individual contributor and things like that, you're better off to not step into the arena and lead others if it's not your heart. But if you're going to accept the privilege of leading others, I encourage you to take it very seriously. And you may not recognize in the moment of how much of an impact that you have on those that you're working with. And when you start to realize that when the years go by in your career and those people reach out to you every so often, only to say, thank you, I'm better as a result of the relationship and the work we did together. And I appreciate the patience you had with me along the way and some of those things you taught. So, leadership's hard. So I invite you to lean into it, enjoy the ride, and thank you for attending today.
All right. Well, just as I said earlier, you will all receive a recap in the next 24 hours. I'll make sure it includes the recording. It'll have some notes. And then Marshall said he has that longer document explaining more deeply into the questions that I'll include as well. This also will live on our website where you can share it with your team. Be sure to check out all of our upcoming events at petracoach.com. Click the events tab and you will see everything we've got going on, and also can look up some of our previous ones. And as always, if you have any further questions or we can provide additional help for you or your organization, please reach out to us at info@petracoach.com. Marshall, thanks for being with us today.
All right. Thanks so much. Go out and have a great day. Enjoy what's left in your holiday and make a difference.